Welcome, travelers. I'm Josh.
And I'm Lewanika. And this is Tabletop Journeys, where we will be your not-so-humble guides on the quest for RPG adventures.
Welcome back to Tabletop Journeys. Very excited to be talking to you all once again. If you are paying close attention, you will see that the three of us are wearing the same clothes that we were when we did our live show about a week and a half ago, talking about the departures from Wizards of the Coast and the arrivals at Darrington Press and all that sort of thing. But here we are talking about a different topic altogether. So once again, joined across the microphone from my co-host for nearly 5 years now, which is a scary thought, Mr. Lewanika Miller in Connecticut, and for much less than 5 years, except in my heart, Mr. Michael Russ. Gentlemen, how the hell are you? What's going on?
I'm doing great. So this is from the future. So in the past,
you've gone to Origins. And
I've gone to Origins. I had a wonderful time, and we'll talk all about it next time.
Yeah.
At
the time of airing, I will be. What will I be doing? Oh, at the time this is airing, I will be enjoying my youngest son's 19th birthday, preparing to go to one of my nephew's wedding. I cannot be more excited about that, and planning on having a great weekend with my grandkids and kids. Another one of my nieces who I don't get to see nearly enough, and with luck, I might actually get a breeze through.
Of one of the best stores in Maine.
And see Jay Plum and swing by and see Josh and Jenny for a brief moment, even if it's as we are driving through to head back to Connecticut.
Yeah. You slow down enough for me to go ahead and throw a stack of books in your window, pretty much.
Like high five on the way through.
Yeah. So, but so before we get into tonight's episode, I do feel like I have one really big piece of news that I am so excited to go ahead and say. The Traveler's Guide to Factions is done.
Whoa!
I mean, it is through the editing. All the stat blocks are done. It has gone through all the layout feedback. We are at the stage right now where, at the point of this recording, we are waiting for the proof copies to arrive, so that we can tear them apart mercilessly because they're 100% wrong and need to be done from the ground up. But that's not the point. The point is that the proof copies have been ordered. I'm not sure who's happier about this, our backers or me or Lewanika. Like it's probably a tie. It's like a three-way tie. Yeah,
it's me.
It might be.
It's me.
Yeah.
You know what? I can one up that. It's our wives. Our wives are the happiest women on the planet, bar none.
100%. Yeah. For all the right reasons.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, what's not to love?
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah. So tonight we're going to be talking about campaign seeds, and Michael, this was your idea, so I want to go ahead and start with you. Why don't you set the table for us so that we can go ahead and enjoy this fine meal?
Yeah. So as a game master myself, the way that I generally like to do things is I have like broad swaths of what's going to happen in a game, but I'm very much an emergent play sort of GM. I love to give my players narrative control because that lets me play too. And so I can kind of learn and develop and I kind of have like improv rules, like they throw out a thing and I'm kind of like, okay, well, how does that make sense? And how can I take what they gave me and then twist it around and serve it back to them in a way that's interesting and unique? And so some of the ways that I manage this at the table is I like to include details in the games that I don't necessarily know what they mean. But if the players latch onto them, they can become important later. And I think of these like campaign seeds as like, they may ignore them, but if they take root in soil and they blossom and bloom, then they will become more important later on. And so I just had the idea of like, we could each share a couple, maybe things we've actually done in the past, or maybe brainstorm a little bit on some of these that we could help. Not necessarily like the listeners take, for example, like exactly, but the idea of them and like how we would incorporate them.
Yeah.
So for example, I'll start.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the games that I played years and years ago when I think it was before the podcast started, but it was with the group of players that were initially part of the RPG Academy. Brad, in particular, I remember was in this game. I threw out this NPC that just had very vibrant green eyes, and this is something I do a lot. I just throw out details. Again, I don't don't necessarily mean anything. I just as I'm narrating, as I'm storytelling, I throw in little details. And I apparently had got stuck on this green eye thing, and I didn't realize it. And I think it was the third time that I had described a different NPC having vibrant green eyes. I'm pretty sure it was Brad who said, that's weird. He's talking to people, he's like, have you noticed that there's so many NPCs, or, he didn't say that, so many people in the city have really striking green eyes. And that's when I realized, like, holy crap, I guess I've been overusing it.
Yeah.
So immediately it became a doppelganger. It was the same person each time. And so it became a recurring theme that every time there was a vibrant green-eyed NPC, it was the same character who did not exist the first, second, or even the third time I used that detail. But then when the fourth time, it was part of the story going forward.
Yep.
So just describing NPCs with vibrant green eyes became a campaign seed that took root and became very important. And I thought a very cool element of that campaign.
I love the idea of sort of taking physical characteristics and assigning meaning to them in the greater world. Like it's kind of like the whole, like if you're playing a Fey game, you've got red hair people, all that sort of stuff, like all those sorts of things, the kind of how like unique physical characteristics that make a difference. I remember not in the game that I'm currently running now, but the last campaign that I was running, there was it was a really like expansive, like, world with like multiple cities, and they very kind of open world concept where the players could kind of go wherever they wanted. And there was one town that was kind of like the evil town, right? It was like necromancy was like openly practiced in the streets, and you had necromancers who were like walking around with like zombie servants and stuff like that kind of behind them, and it was kind of a like dark and seedy kind of like Las Vegas style place, and very much the guy on the docks that kind of ran everything secretly through this shadow cabal notably only had one arm. And in a game where healing and power and everything is, especially in a city that's full of necromancers, it's like having somebody with kind of like a physical issue like that was notable, was a
Memorable,
notable characteristic, right? And really, the out of game reason for that is that when I was printing the fig on my own 3D printer, the print messed up and only printed one arm for the dude. So rather than try to go ahead and because I was doing it last minute and blah blah blah, and so rather than try to print a new one, I was like, oh, that dude's only got one arm. And it was one of those things that that was like very much a plot thread that they could have pulled on, because I created this whole backstory about why he only had one arm and why he was like why he resisted healing magic and all that sort of stuff. Became this huge big kind of like subplot about that character. So I love the fact that kind of you can take kind of unique physical characteristics or unique sort of perspectives on the world and kind of reflect them in the physicality of an NPC. I think that's really, really powerful because it gives the player something tangible to kind of latch onto. Like, oh, well, I've got two arms, but if I saw him with one arm, that would be weird. Why is that weird? What's going on? Kind of thing.
Especially in the world that has resurrection and regeneration and healing magics of extreme natures. Like there isn't that unless there's something else that happens, or unless you've altered the rules of the campaign world from the base D&D game.
Well, that was actually that was actually what the story was, that he couldn't be healed, and that there was a reason for that because he wasn't fully human, so he couldn't be healed by human magic. That was kind of the way that it.
But it's still a question that could have been asked, and which could have led, or maybe did lead into some interesting things.
So for me, I'm thinking about plot threads and seeds that are a little less overt, but very persistent. And I'll be honest with you, for me, this first one is one that I do somewhat frequently, and it is generally because my specific memory is far worse than my general memory. I will remember a general concept of the campaign that I'm running, but in the moment I get lost in the sauce. So I'm always looking for something to bring me back to why I was in this moment or where this adventure was supposed to lead, because what I don't do is look right back at my notes while I'm in the game. So I will just follow wherever the players will lead. But the thing that I will frequently build into my campaigns is music, and not directly. Sometimes in the past, I have sometimes played music during scenes or what have you, or I'll make theme songs for various characters and things like that. But I'm thinking back to a campaign I ran in Connecticut right before I moved to Maine the first time, or before I moved to Maine. And then I used that even in my campaign that I ran in Maine that was in that same world. And it is something that I continue to use, or continued past tense to use, when I did my Land of 18 Seas campaign with the Lost Ones and the Northerners. And I took the song Kashmere, one of my favorite Zeppelin songs, and I used that thoroughly and completely in a weird twist of the universe where Robert Plant and the folks at Zeppelin definitely used Tolkien's Lord of the Rings for a couple of their songs. I took their song and used it for my D&D game. And specifically with Kashmere, it was originally it was less the music and more the lyrics.
Mhm.
So basically there was this great ancient poem, and there's all these big events. I won't go into all the details. But this great ancient poem, and I basically wholesale just used the lyrics for Kashmere. And I have friends who love music or what have you, but very few of them are as into Zeppelin as I am. So they didn't recognize the lyrics removed from the music at all. And I never actually put all the lyrics all at once. And I never used the line where the word Kashmere is actually stood there. In fact, the one time I used the entire thing, I used a lighter and burned several words, including Kashmere, so you couldn't see the whole thing. And then every single session had a line or a verse of the song that was basically the core of that adventure. So I literally built adventures based on the lines or verses of the song, and this took place over a long period of time. So, and I had done that twice because it was an event that would take place every 10 years. So the first campaign I did it, and then the second campaign I did it, and most people didn't realize that. So when I got to the Lost Ones, I didn't use the words at all, because the Lost Ones in the Land of 18 Seas was a campaign world based on what they didn't solve in those campaigns back in the 80s and the 90s. But it was this unique pocket universe formed by one NPC character from that other universe. That was the beating heart of this world. So the actual rhythm of that pocket universe was the music to Kashmere. So I went online, found all different arrangements for Kashmere. And when they would go into temples, I would play one of those arrangements, or I would get that broken up into different lines. So you might get the bass line from Kashmere, or you might get the melody from Kashmere, or you might get the something else. And sometimes they might get a line of poetry that was that, or a building that was named for that, or something like that, or a festival that was named after some line, but it was always there. And at one point, 2 players latched onto the fact that it had to be a Zeppelin song, but they could never figure out which one it was. And it was like in our chats, they went into it and their characters were always looking for it. But all they knew was whenever they heard this music or this bass line or this thing, and they were starting to piece it together, and then I would start to put the pieces that they had together to fully form the song, they knew what it was all about. When they finally got all of it, then I was able to play the song, Sam's the Words, for them. So they're like, oh, now we get it. And that's when the whole campaign revealed itself as to what they were actually doing.
That's very cool.
And it always kept me focused and centered, because the one thing I could never forget is that song. So I always knew where that song was going. And so I always knew where the campaign had to go.
Yeah. I think that is super cool, that not only that you're kind of using that as like a way to tie together multiple. So that's not even like a single campaign seed. That's like it's like a whole tree of campaigns kind of coming off one route. That's really, really cool.
I agree. It would be over my head. I would never, like, I have no musical talent, or I'm tone deaf. So I would just be like, okay.
Had Josh been in that game, he'd have found it with the 3rd bar, guaranteed. Like, it would not have lasted. And then Josh would not have kept his mouth shut and blabbed the whole thing. Yeah. And once he realized the words, he'd had the whole thing solved, because it was literally like, this was not rocket science. The resolution to the campaign was in the lyrics to the song.
Yeah. Not that it has anything to do with what we were just talking about, but I remember when we were in music school, one of the things that was really, really fun. This was back when like Google Translate was kind of just coming about. We would take like pop songs and run them through like multiple languages, and ultimately wind up in Dutch, and then try to translate them back into English and see how funny it was. It was always hysterical. So that's yeah. Try that next time, maybe. So yeah, that's great. And actually, so that kind of like thematic element that kind of ties things together kind of bridges directly into mine. I mean, the easy one that I can think of right now is that, so I'm running in my home game campaign. I'm basically leading my players there at level 5 right now. They just crossed into level 5. They just cleared tier 1, but they're basically leading into Vecna Eve of Ruin is where we're going eventually. It's not going to be the same kind of plot that runs there, but it's the overarching. You have to go ahead and defeat Vecna. It's basically the scope of what's going to be going on. So I'm kind of leading them there. And so, since very, very early in the campaign, they have seen this kind of eye motif that has appeared throughout the town that they're in various ways, and it has always sort of pointed to something weird going on. And so it started very, very early, where it's like, they saw it. There was like a session 0 kind of adventure where there was this lantern that gets lit and set above the city as a part of an annual festival, and the lantern got stolen because someone thought that it was cursed and everything like that. And when they find it, they find this little eye motif. I'm like, that's weird, kind of thing. And then they're down an alleyway and they're just about to get jumped by cultists, but before they get jumped by cultists, they see the eye in chalk on the wall. And so they kind of start seeing this eye everywhere and kind of establish it as this is what the bad guys identify with. This is how they identify themselves. And there's some variations that they're starting to pick up on. Like maybe there are different factions of bad guys, but they all kind of work with the same thing, but they don't know what the bad guys are. And then, so that kind of like lays out the iconography, right? Like there's this thing that means there are bad guys coming. The next step then is the subversion of that expectation, right? So they are working with an NPC right now, and they have found this information out in game, so I don't have to worry too much about spoilers because my players have started listening to the podcast. So I have to be very careful about what I say now, because they're starting to be like, "Hey, you said you were going to do this. How come? Why don't we have the Fey portal in our bastion?" It's like, but so they have realized that there's an NPC that they're working with, that as they were kind of like, so the big bad guy that they were accidentally working for sent them to go ahead and basically kill this NPC. And they tried to steal from him and realized that he was super well defended, and they decided not to go ahead and do that. But they realized that in the masonry of his house was this eye motif. They found it kind of like, they investigated it and found it in the masonry of the house. Like, oh, he must be connected to the bad guys, right? Only to go ahead and find out that his family has been for years, but he's actually working against them. He's trying not to be. He is a holder of one of the 7 amulets, and he is trying actively to stop what is going on. So he has it safe, which is why his house is abnormally well defended, because he knows that eventually they will come for him.
Right.
And so it's starting to subvert the expectations. Like, you see this motif. Oh, the motif means bad guys. Oh, ha. Now you see the motif, and it doesn't mean bad guy. It means, connection to the bad guys, but really somebody that you can trust. So it's kind of like, how do you layer those sort of the motifs and the expectations through iconography, through kind of visual symbols and things that they can investigate and discover. I like that. I like doing that sort of stuff a lot, because I really like playing with, much like how Lewanika loves running. He loves very political games and everything like that, and those kind of always has those sort of themes. I like playing games not so much with like a puzzle, but certainly with sort of I'm going to lead you down a road and I'm going to make you think certain things. And then I'm going to start suggesting that that's not actually true. And that's going to be the puzzle that you need to figure out, is oh yeah, I have conflicting information. What do I do with this? Which direction do I go? And much like you, Michael, I run really collaborative games where I'm taking feedback from the players in a variety of different ways that's going to inform how the game is going. And so kind of depending on sometimes when I give them all this conflicting information, I don't really know which way I want them to go or which way they're going to go. And kind of depending on which way they go determines on what happens next, sort of thing.
Right.
Because there's no wrong answer. It's more just like, I have just like spilled a bunch of crap in front of you. Which stick do you pick up? Sort of thing. And then depending on which stick you pick up, that's the stick that we run with. So I like doing that sort of stuff, and so being able to kind of set expectations and then subvert expectations, kind of over and over again in various ways, is a kind of a seed that I use a lot. I use it a lot through like iconography and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, all right, I think that actually, I think that brings us back to you, sir.
Yep. So another one that I've used multiple times. There's a particular one shot that I've ran a few dozen times, and it's one that I wrote. I really like it. And one of the elements is that there are a bunch of goblins in it because it's kind of a low level, learn how to play D&D adventure. And but the goblins in it, I start out by saying there's something weird about the way they smell. That they smell bad, but it's like a perfumed smell, like they're trying to cover their normal smell. So it's like they know they smell bad, so they're trying to like wear perfume, but it doesn't quite work. But it's notable that they're trying. And then once they have the first like real encounter, and again, their goblins are probably going to die, they notice that all their equipment is like pristine, brand new, like custom made armor that fits them. Rather than usually goblins are like scavengers, like everything's mishmash, hodgepodge. And also there's no maker's mark, because I've had a few people look into that. So it's all custom made armor, weapons, material, but there's no maker's mark. And it just sets up this sort of mystery that the way the game is designed, it's basically like it ends on not really a cliffhanger, but it ends on an absolutely, there could be a part 2, but the part 2 is for the, like, I've taught you now how to play the game. Now you're supposed to go play part 2.
Yeah.
So I don't actually know what that's about. But every single time I've ran it, it comes up. At least one player is like, that's weird, isn't it? And they're asking questions like, why do we think's going on? And it really builds in. It's not important. It doesn't make or break the game, but it's interesting enough that it causes people to ask those questions. The idea being, well, your DM will have to decide what it means when you do the part 2 for this. So that can be extrapolated to any subversion of expectations. I've done the ogre who's really smart, who speaks very intelligently. He's like a British butler ogre rather than the doofish one or oafish one, because it stands out as unique and interesting, and maybe it becomes important or not. But those are one that I've used multiple ways, the subversion of intelligence or just the way they behave.
So what's really funny is that at my home game, I also run with the rule that every PC and NPC has that one unique trait. There's a thing that they have that is unique, that sets them apart from everybody else in the game world. I have a bugbear PC at my table, which is a tremendous amount of fun, because the one unique thing that he took is that he's the only bugbear PC or NPC. All the other bugbears in the world are monstrous and creatures and everything like that. He's the only bugbear that's not monstrous. He's the only one that has kind of like ascended to the level of NPCdom, or I'm not even sure, like, or to like humanoid status. He's basically moved from like monstrous to humanoid, for lack of a better term, right? But more than just that, he has the highest intelligence score in the entire party. He's the smartest one, but still acts like a bugbear. So he basically speaks like Yoda without English lessons, right? Like, very like backward sentences and incomplete things and everything like that. But everyone else is like, wait, he's like a chess grandmaster. Like that's how they found him and how he makes his money, is he was in a bar playing chess with people, like just raking money in, because he's brilliant. He's got like a 15 intelligence. It's the highest intelligence of anybody in the game. So it's like, or at least at the table, so that's a really fun way to kind of play with that. But yeah, I love the unsolved mystery aspect of that too. Like, not just am I setting up this mystery that can go any direction, but I'm never going to go ahead and reveal what the ending is, because that's for you to go ahead and decide the next time you play. How that's really empowering for an ex-DM to go ahead and say that you have kind of, again, you've laid the table, and then you're really letting them do whatever they want with it, which is really interesting.
It would be very low level, obviously, for your experience, because it's designed to teach people. I wrote this adventure right when 5th edition came out. I've been running it basically since 5th edition. That's how I teach people how to play at conventions, that kind of thing. But I'm very proud of that adventure. I think it's really well done. There was a period of time where I wanted to like publish it. I just never got around to it. But I'd love to run it for you folks at one point in time,
That'd be
or
awesome.
maybe like for a patron thing, just so you can kind of see where it ends and how I set up for the future. Because I would love for someone else to do the part two. I'd love to see where people take it. But anyway.
So what I'll say to that, Michael, is this real quick, and then I'll jump onto one of my plot seeds, is that you might know a couple folks who publish adventures, and I absolutely wholeheartedly love that concept. And to your question, absolutely yes, let's do that. Don't have the date just yet. Get back from Origins. Well, I'm sorry, we are back from Origins.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that we're back, now
if I don't have to,
is back from Origins. Let's get on that.
If I don't actually have to teach, if I don't actually have to teach people how to play, because that's kind of part of the way it's written, like I'm explaining what skill checks are, blah blah blah. It probably take less than 2 hours to run the adventure. It's like a 3 to 3.5, but it's like, here's a D20. Let's let's explain how that works without having to do all that. It's actually pretty short. So anyways, move on.
Yeah. I would love that, because I do a lot of learn to plays, and I have one coming up in August at Terrificon at Mohegan Sun here in Connecticut, where I run really short adventures in the Citadel Game Cellar space. And that would be a really good thing to be able to run. And I got a good friend from high school whose son is really into D&D, and I'm really looking forward to picking out some good young Jack's really he's in elementary school but loves the game, so I'm really looking at trying to find some good adventures for Jack's age group to be able to do that. So
I'm actually
we're going to link up to do that.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be running a bunch of learn to plays at my local library this summer. So we should talk. Let's figure this out. I love it. I love the idea.
Yeah, so. And I've been talking with the ladies from Weirdsterly about running at the Westerly Public Library right across from their studio as well. So I think
we're gonna make this happen.
That has legs.
I love it.
That has legs.
Love it.
And perfume. You know,
and really nice armor. Apparently,
there's something about a goblin with a dagger and a hand crossbow wearing Drakkar Noir that just sings for me.
Yep.
Well, I mean, mostly because that was you in 1994.
Exactly. Yep.
Through 2006. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I was gonna say, we met shortly after that. So yeah, I remember that. Yeah. You still
There's a whole story there, but you'll have to ask me about that one on Discord. So for me, I was thinking about a lot of different things, and I'm going to go back to the Land of 18 Seas because it was my last big D&D campaign that I ran, and I did a lot of this. So this was a campaign that I wrote, and I began again taking over from what had been done in the 80s that Marty ran for me, friend of the show Marty, and primary editor on the actual play, Star Trek Preservations, but also the games that I ran in the 90s, both in Connecticut and in Maine when I first moved to Portland for college. And when I decided to bring this concept back and build on what had come before, I really was focused on making it freeform and making the game be what the players wanted it to be. With very few limitations, it was build what you want. And the players included my buddy Chad, who I was in the Army with, his two children, who are about the same age as my youngest. So we're talking 12 and 10 and 11 at the time when we started. And just random passersby some I knew, some I didn't know, and have since become good friends with at the Citadel. And the idea with this game that's being played publicly with this disparity of ages and experience levels was to make it accessible for kids, but not dumbed down for adults, and fun for Chad and myself who just wanted to be able to game as single dads at the time who needed to get together and hang out, but we have our kids, so we wanted to have it something that we could do together. And so as I did that, the concept was all the characters were orphans. They were siblings in an orphanage, and the big rule was you are siblings who love each other, and that's sacrosanct. You don't necessarily have to get along with each other. You can have any number of conflicts, but the one thing that is incontrovertible is that these are your siblings and that you care about them. You can build whatever relationship with each of them that you want, but you would never do anything to get them killed or get them hurt. You would do things maybe to embarrass them if that's the way you want to build your character, but you would never do anything that would put them in jeopardy, and you would always do what it takes to get them out of jeopardy. That was the only overall rule, and that was because we had so many different people that could be coming in. I wanted to make it very clear that party unity, I had to reinforce the social contract in a way narratively, and so that was it. Everybody had to be part of this orphanage, and this orphanage had been around for years before and years after, which allowed, if anybody lost a character or wanted to change their character, they could still play somebody from there, because they could have been an orphan that was there for years before, had left, and now is back involved. They could have aged out and now they're a grown adult coming back, or what have you. Or they could be a new orphan that's kind of new that is learning to be with everybody else. So I wanted to set that up. But a couple of the things I did was just seed plots the players could choose if they wanted to. The one thing I did is I never built a map off the beginning. It was just their town. In fact, I had a map of their actual orphanage, and I said, town, the main part of town is a couple blocks that away. Never drew that out. And then for the first encounter, I had a 2-block radius, and that was all. And it was a relatively small town. But the couple plot seeds I said is the people who ran the orphanage was a married couple. The woman was a halfling. You know she was an adventurer in the past. You don't know a lot of details about that. And a dwarf. And the dwarf was a soldier. You know that he is sometimes referred to by people who come by as commander, but you don't know what army he served in, and it's not the army of the kingdom you're in. And he has a hunting lodge that the older children, older than you, have gone to several times, but this group has never been there yet. And that's half a day's ride away. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Yeah. And when the first adventure happened, things did not go well for the party. They did some things. They did really cool things, but they were going to be chased by the law. So they had to bolt, and they had to run, and they had to hide. And so the first thing they did is say, where can we hide? Well, if we go back to the orphanage, that'll bring everybody back to mom and pop. So we don't want to go there. And they knew, and I had also told them there's a lake somewhere nearby where you could go and hide out. Basically, I was setting up a kind of a Red Dawn Wolverines kind of setup. There's a couple places they could go, but in general, they knew that staying in town was probably not the best way to go. And the first thing they did is, we're going to Papa's hunting lodge. And so then they went there. Then a couple sessions later, I had to literally do a travel session because I had no idea what that was going to be like. Mm-hmm. So I had to develop that. And then it was like, when they got there, I had to seed some things like, okay, what am I going to do here? And then there's a couple goblins that would be nearby that they would see them, but didn't interact. And they're like, oh, I got to know more about them. And then all of a sudden they became important because the players engaged with that. And then they wanted to search the premises for secret doors and things like that. Somebody rolled really well. So I'm not going to say, okay, you searched thoroughly and there's nothing. I had nothing, but I said, oh, there's a secret room and there's some books in there. Like, oh, I'm going to spend some time with that. I'm like, okay, but if you spend time with that, you're not going to get out of Dodge and there's going to be some other things happening. No, we're going to spend time with this. So a couple sessions later, I'm like, okay, here's the information you have from studying all these books. And then I just started developing that this is where Papa had all of his gear and his information about the army he served in and what he did. And all of a sudden now he was the member of an elite group from this other army in this other land. Now the party ended up not really following that thread terribly much at that time. They went to other things. But as we went, every time they picked on a thread and said, oh, I want to know about this. And I could say, well, this thing is 1 week away or 2 weeks away. And there's something about halfway between. So I always had like this travel bit, and then the thing that was halfway in between, which was usually effectively a random encounter, but I would plan it out. So that, they came across a dragon. They were way too low level to be a dragon. So basically this dragon said, I want you to do me a favor. Well, what's a favor? I need you to take out one of my enemies. Well, why are we going to take out your enemy? Because if you don't, I'll kill you. Mm-hmm. Like, would you save your brethren to agree to this Gaius? And so they're like, yes, no save necessary. Two of the party members took the Gaius. And so then I told them that this is this great big white dragon that lives way far in the north. You'll probably never see it, but if you ever do, he'll know you're after him and you'll know you're supposed to be after them. And all these bad things happen if you try to defeat the Gaius without doing that. Years later, they end up traveling north. And now I bring in that dragon. And now they have to deal with that. And then they're like, oh, we can't handle that. And so then one of the players is like, I need to do a side mission to do something else. He's like, what? So then they actually go back and take out the original dragon. Because now they're enough level to take out the original dragon so that the brothers aren't there. So then all of a sudden that dragon's parent is now pissed. And now they've got a bigger dragon than the original white dragon. And now, but those are the kinds of things that I really liked doing. That campaign really went the way the players went. There was originally no overall plan for that. It was visit the world, go where you want. I built the map as they traveled. And eventually they had been enough places where I was able to commission a map to be drawn for the campaign world. Because they had been enough places or had enough information. This is 3 days away, 4 days away, so on and so forth. So I was able to give the dimensions and the topography of the whole world. And that's literally how that world was built, was basically just people going different places. And generally every session I would throw out a thing or 2 or 3 things that could be of interest, let them pick one thing and follow that, and the other thing would stay dormant. It got to be there were so many things that were dormant and clues that the second campaign, the Northerners, was literally built on all the things in the far north that this group didn't want to deal with. They're like, I'm not going that far. We're going to do this. And I'm like, man, I have got way too many plot seeds in this world that I want to keep building to leave. So I built a whole new campaign that was literally built on the untold threads from the first group.
Yep. I love it.
That's a
fantastic.
forever DM right there. Yeah.
I have to, I'm not going to talk about it next, but, the whole mapping, going without a map and kind of building the map collaboratively. I'm going to touch on that one on my third one here. But that sounds like a lot of fun, kind of like using the scenes that you're building as recurring characters. It's not even so much that like, it's not specifically a character, but it's more like it's more than a character. It's the entire scene that kind of comes up and up and up and up again. So that's really, really cool. Yeah. So the next one that I wanted to get into is one that I'm calling Search Your Feelings, Luke, I Am Your Father. It's the bad guy that they meet at the very beginning that is actually more than just a random bad guy, right? I've used this device so many times in so many different ways. I've used it in my current game. I kind of won't get into that because that one's almost like the most obvious. Like the bad guy hired them from the very beginning, and from the very beginning they're like, there's something not right with this chick.
Right.
Something's up. But they didn't really, the money was good, so they kind of kept going at it, and then ultimately find out that she was the tier 1 boss kind of thing. Something that I thought I hid apparently much better than I did. Like I thought I was kind of both being like super obvious, but they weren't picking up on it. I was like, I don't know why they keep working for this woman. Like that's but the one I think was the absolute best was again kind of like on my previous campaign where we had a kind of an extensive session 0 scene that established why this party was together. So the whole concept was that it was kind of like a West Marches campaign where there was this whole like campaign in the eastern side of the island that the king was calling for conscripts and the players were conscripts, right? And so like they were thrown to that was the reason why the party was together is that they were kind of randomly drawn together and they were put into this thing. And in the session 0 there was an NPC sorcerer that was with them and on their campaign he basically like fell off of a waterfall in the middle of a campaign and died, they thought, right? He was gonna come back as a villain very, very shortly for a variety of reasons in the campaign. It was part of what was going on. He had he'd fallen into like this entire thing of drow and they had resurrected him but made him into a drider and now he was mad. It was basically the Darth Maul thing, right, where he'd fallen into an infinite pit and went insane and now he was a bad guy kind of thing. But like it was very intentional that I built them in around this NPC in session 0 only to like snatch him away from them immediately and then seemingly throw him away as a demonstration of how brutal the campaign was going to be. Kind of like dressed it up as one thing, like, oh, look, any of you could, I hope you have backup characters, I blah, 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 all that sort of pretense about what his death meant. Only to know in the back of my head that that's not what his death meant at all, that his death was purely a device to go ahead and set up like the tier 2 of the campaign. And again, I guess that kind of goes back to like the subversion of expectations sort of thing, where it's like, yeah, I'm setting something up only to go ahead and have it mean something totally different than what I'm telling you it means. But it's also like tying it to a specific person, and also very specifically tying it into the players. Like, we've done a whole bunch of collaborative world building. What was the relationship between player X and this NPC? How did they get along? How did they know each other? Did they know each other before they got together? Or was he just a random conscript? And and in, again, kind of like in that collaborative way, like they all knew him somehow. Like that was, so it's like, I didn't think that, I thought that I had telegraphed this pretty well, that he was not only going to perish immediately, but that he was going to come back. But apparently they were like, no, we had no idea that was going to happen. When he walked out of there and he was like half spider, half thing, and he started, he's like, how did you leave me in the waterfall? That kind of thing. They were petrified about this, what had happened here. So, so that was a lot of fun. For me as a storyteller to go ahead and do that, because it was a really big reveal, and it was a really interesting way to kind of like set up something that had happened in their characters previously and have it come back like that. So it was a lot of fun. It was a good time, So, nice. But again, kind of that subversion of expectations, set up something only to go ahead and rip it away as soon as they start to love it.
Basically, I mean that's the classic movie situation. I think like Indiana Jones and Last or the Search, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Sorry, it's like the very first thing that happens is we see like some dude get killed, so that you can see how dangerous the world is.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yep.
One thing I will point out, just as a player, I have done this on occasion where I feel like I'm ahead of the DM. Like they introduce him like, oh, well, this is clearly main bad guy, and I'll just pretend like I don't know it. Just be like, we're gonna go back to that lady who we know is going to betray us, but. I'm not trying to like, haha, I'm smarter than you. I'm like, this is the story we're in. So
this is the story we're in. Yeah.
Sometimes players will just go along, and I would say as a player, maybe you should.
Yeah. Well, so what's really funny though is with my newer campaign. So the current campaign that I'm running, I've got 2 pretty experienced players and 4 players that are like either just entry level or like one click above. And independently, the really experienced players were like, oh yeah, no, that she's no good. We know she's no good. We don't really know what it is. And both of them independently also suspected that this was a Vecna mission, by the way. To which I was like, who knows? Could be
weird.
Whoa, what? No, Vecna would be weird. Vecna's so popular now, whatever. But what surprised me was that the other 4, like the newer players, like, oh yeah, no, she's bad news. Like we knew she was bad news from the minute that she started throwing us money. We're like, this chick's a little too anxious to have us do her dirty work. She clearly needs dirty work done. Good people don't need dirty work done.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yes.
So okay. Yeah.
Josh, you touched on something that when I think about when I first started the Land of 18 Seas, bearing in mind I had 3 children at the game, like children, and now all 3 had been role playing for about 2 years, 3 years.
Yep.
Like they started when they were 12, because we actually started with the Riz campaign. They were probably 14 and 15-ish when we started the D&D campaign. So they had about 3-4 years of role playing involved. But when we started the D&D campaign, there was no part of my player group that was less trusting of anything I did than those 3 kids.
Sure.
Now it's one thing for my kid to be that way. He knows me. He knows his dad is evil as the day is long, right? Yeah. I pride myself on being the left shoulder guy, right? For my buddy Chad's 2 kids to say, no, there's something wrong about that, when grown adults are legitimately trying to convince them, no, it's just this. Because again, it's that subversion of what they expect. They're in a D&D game like they've been in 14 million other D&D games, and what they expected was what they thought they'd get. Because I'm subverting that a bit, these children we're approaching it in a very different way. In a similar fashion, when I did Star Trek at a Catacon, and Michael, your son, played with us on my last game. He was the one who diagnosed everything perfectly, and he was the one who said, "Yep, I know what's going on, and I know which one of these other players are going to get in the way of me doing the right thing, even if doing the right thing means violating Starfleet regulations, like going outside of my chain of command type of thing." And held his cards so close to the vest. I'm telling you, you talk about you play poker,
Yeah.
look out for your kid, man. Don't put money on the table when he's playing, because I didn't even see it coming. And when he did what he needed to do, everybody was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, people stood up and clapped because
Nice.
we were like, never even saw it come. But he had it pegged the entire time. Like, and it was, and I do think no small part about that is those of us who've been doing it a lot. You spoke about it in a recent episode about us being as content creators, as talking heads on YouTube and Spotify and podcasting. We're in a bubble. We are very cloistered in our own group. We talk to the same types of people, if not the same people, for years on end. Put somebody who's never done that, brand new to the game, but you tell them you get to play a character like you see on TV, or like you see in this. They know that IP, or they know that type of character, and they have a creative mind. They're not shackled by what we're shackled by. There is no convention. There is, I see the information in front of me, and I diagnose that information with no filter, and I make decisions based on that. There is no pure form of, wow, you didn't telegraph what you thought you were going to telegraph, or you telegraphed it way too much, than somebody who's brand new to the game but just as creative.
I love it.
Very cool.
All right, I've got one more. How about you guys?
I got one more. I'll go pretty quick. Because I have two very similar. One, I use tattoos a lot. It's very common. Like they dispatch some random bandits, and they're attacking a farm, and while they're checking, basically checking their pockets for loose change, roll perception. You notice one of them has a weird tattoo on the inside of their left forearm, and I'll just it looks like an R with a line through it. It looks like an eyeball or whatever, and then I may never bring it up again, or maybe like 3 levels later, they'll run into somebody else like who's alive who has that same tattoo. Like, oh wait, that's weird. They must be part of the same group. And I'll just like if they attach to it, good or yes or no, whatever happens. But the one I used most recently that I really really liked is they started with goblins. They fought a bunch of goblins, and as they were going over the bodies, they noticed that every single goblin had their right pinky missing, and very clean cut. Obviously, it was intentional, and over it's just detail I just made up on the spot. But then I started they would run into that more and more often. They would run into people. They would fight on whatever assassin guild was after them, and every now and then they'd find someone that had their right pinky missing, and it just became this thing where they were just looking for it. Like, I'm looking for anybody who has a missing pinky, and then at one point a player was missing. Again, sorry, long story short. So I just had their character be kidnapped, and so they're like, "Oh gosh, we got to get there quick, or they're going to cut this guy's fingers off." So even though that was not part of it at all, it actually added a sense of urgency because I'd laid that detail so long ago that I didn't have to do anything to make them not worry about. They weren't taking short rest. They were like, we got to go because if we don't get there in time, our buddy's going to miss their fingers. And he was a wizard, so that might have been an issue.
Yeah. Spells are only 80% effective. Yeah.
So just little details like that. I had no idea what it meant at the time, but it ended up being like this cult that you were part of. And basically that was like your initiation. Once you were in, you had to lose your pinky. And then it was long-term because the campaign ended up dying because all mine do. It was going to be different fingers meant different things. And then there was regenerative magic. So there was a point that maybe they might have someone who, again, they check their pinkies, they're there. Ultimately, they're actually the bad guy, but they have a regenerative amulet that you didn't know about. Blah, blah, blah. So, all right, so that's my last one. So missing fingers or tattoos, always a good call.
I like it. Nice.
If I were to go for one that's super fast, I would say that I am a big fan of changing gender role dynamics. whether that's the product from being largely raised by a single mother who was a very strong figure in my upbringing, and being around large number of women who were very formative in my upbringing, who were driven, focused, smart, handled their business. I like having NPCs where the women are the power, but I also like being quasi-realistic to a medieval society where that is frowned upon, shunned upon, it's worked against. So player characters end up in situations where they're supporting the stronger NPC in some fashion. So they work for her, or they're in a situation where they have to decide which way to go, and then they make that decision, and then they find out, oh wow, this was the right decision. If I have a tell, it's probably that. If there's usually a question, it's probably going to be the woman who's the smart one and the one who's running the show. That's a tell for me. But I would say that is something that I just don't do. I don't think it works well if every woman they run across is that way. I like to seed that information. So when they go into an organization or a city or an area run by this woman or whatever, there are things that will be different than a typical community. I will call out those differences in subtle ways and to telegraph or seed that plot. Like, it's funny, this area has a better, more holistic approach to caring for the underserved, or this has a more nurturing environment than that. Even if that strong woman is the bad guy, you will find that the minions are more properly taken care of. They have a fair, more equitable distribution of either wealth or merit. It is less about you're the one who sucked up the most. It's more about if you are the smartest in the room, you get the best position. If you're the strongest in the room, you're the one in charge of the fighting or what have you. It is not. You don't find worm tongue in an organization run by women. Worm tongue is the kind of person who is standing alongside a weak-minded male leader. Take that to what it is. I run political games. There's a reason I make this comment specifically in the year 2025. I'll leave it at that.
Always look for shaved eyebrows.
Yeah. But I will absolutely telegraph the societal changes there. So even in societies that are run well by men, it is different. You will find longer work hours, less time for families. You will find more carousing. You will find more of this, that, and the other thing. And maybe that is a bit of a gender bias to some extent on my part. It has just not been my experience that when I'm dealing with strong women who have a good moral fiber, what I view as that, or what have you, to support that the entirely rabble-rousing type of society. And that's not to say I haven't hung with women who love to go out and yuck it up with me and have fun and tear it up, in the old port with me or whatever. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is at a certain point when somebody gets to a position of leadership and they're running things, women do that differently than men, generally speaking. And I think that I like showing that in my games, and I tend to telegraph that when player characters go to new areas. There are certain tells for who might actually be the power behind the throne. Even if that woman is not the one in charge, you'll know who's in charge based on those societal things, those little clues about how things are done. When they walk into a noble house or a merchant house, you'll know who's in charge. Even if the man is in charge of the merchant house, you'll know by the way business is conducted whether or not he answers to his wife or he dictates to his wife.
Interesting. There's a lot on that vine that I don't want to get into right now.
Yeah, that is a landmine filled topic. Yeah. I don't disagree with anything you said. I can see the positives of that, but as three dudes, maybe we leave that one alone.
I would say that it's something I navigate carefully and with a lot of care and a lot of session zero prep. When I'm doing one shots, there's a lot of discussion. I gauge that room. I ask a lot of questions in that session zero piece, even at a one shot or at a convention, to gauge how much I want to go into that versus not. But I also make sure that a lot of I remember specifically one session zero answer I got was a woman had said to me, she's like, I'm not a fan of seeing every NPC who's in charge of something being a man. And I'm not in charge of every woman. I'm not a fan of every woman who's in charge of something being a shrew or the bad guy.
Yep.
I just hope that's not what your game is about. And I remember hearing that, it was a couple of years ago. And I remember thinking about the way I've done my games. And I think I naturally fell into this anyway, but it became a bit more directive about when I pick the gender of an NPC when I'm either writing an adventure or whatever. I'm very cognizant. I don't shy away from a woman being a bad guy or a woman being a good guy or being a likable or non-likable person. I don't shy away from that necessarily, but I am cognizant of making sure that if I show one thing, I do show another side or another character who could be the opposite of that, because I don't want to perpetuate the negative things that I see in the world.
Yep. Fair enough. Yep. All right, I'm going to dive into my last one here. So this kind of Lewanika kind of alluded to this earlier, that at the end of the day, I do sort of have a big mouth, and I really like to go ahead and talk about the fun things that happen in my head. Right, I like sharing the awful thoughts that come to me at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, my players are going to hate this. It's going to be great.
That was largely in jest. I do honestly think Josh would have kept his mouth shut about Kashmere, and separately would have got hold of me and said, that's fucking cool. And I really like what you did there. I'm going to try to keep my mouth shut. I'm like, he'll blab at some point.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be the first point.
So, but knowing this about myself, about how much I love to blab, I love, and I don't do it all the time, but there is something magical about using tools to tell the players exactly how things are going to go wrong for them. And I have used that in a variety of ways. The one that I have done before is I ran a one shot. This was, I think, was at Drinking and Dragons. Actually, I ran a one shot where it was like a long time slot. It was like a 5 or 6 hour time slot. So for the first hour of the game, we didn't play Dungeons and Dragons. We played Everybody is John from the perspective of the big bad of the one shot. And kind of like set up, if you're not familiar with Everybody is John, basically the whole thing is that all of the players are different people inside this John character, and they go through different scenarios, and then they have ways to, it's a super narrative, super collaborative kind of game, and they get to decide how they handle various scenarios, right? And so they did that as the kind of the very beginning of the game, and I used that as a way to go ahead and establish who the NPC was, the types of things the NPC was doing, and exactly what was going to happen if they failed in their mission. And it was hysterical and amazing. They had no idea what the hell was going on, and then as the one shot went on and they started seeing things that they had seen from the perspective of the NPC, they were like, oh, wait a minute. And I also roped it into their characters so that their characters would get these glimpses of what that thing actually meant. It's kind of like playing a video game when you're about to go ahead and, like, you know, you're looking for like the sacred weapon, and all of a sudden you find this glowing dagger in a pile of other daggers. Like, it's the glowing dagger that you want. That's the one.
Right. That's
Pick
the
up
one.
the glowing dagger, you know, kind of thing. So it was a ton of fun to go ahead and do it that way. And it's something that I want to do more often, honestly, because it was a lot of fun to go ahead and set it up that way. And it was really fun to kind of like spill all the beans right up front about this is what's going to happen. It's almost like that's the challenge to the game and that sort of thing. It's like, I'm going to tell you everything that's going to happen. Now you need to go ahead and see if you can stop it. Knowing exactly what's going to happen, how much power does that give you to actually stop what's going to happen, you know, kind of thing. It was almost like a gauntlet being thrown down to the players. A lot of fun. The other one that I want to go ahead and talk about, because this one's relatively recent and I haven't had a chance to go ahead and use it yet, but I just got a game. I haven't even got the physical copy yet because it ships from like Australia, but I've got the PDF copy of a game called Cartograph. It's basically a board game. It's not really a role-playing game, but it's one of these like kind of like role-playing game, board game hybrids. But it's basically it's played on like a big piece of craft paper, and each player has like a dice pool, and you throw your dice, and depending on where your dice land, that's where the borders on the map come up. And then depending on what the numbers are, there are like roll tables that decide, oh, this is a settlement, here's the type of settlement that it is. And the whole point is that, you know, you have to go ahead and make a story about how all these things are connected, you know, and if you're traveling from one point to another point, there are encounters that you can run into and sort of stuff like that. But I think that that would be a really great way to lay out a premise of a game world in advance of a campaign. Like, the very first thing that we're going to do collaboratively at the table is make our game world. And then we're going to decide some plot elements, and we're going to decide, like, you know, why is this little tiny town next to this big gigantic city? Or why are these two gigantic cities next to each other, and why are they so close? Or, you know, why is travel from point A to point B so difficult? Is there a mountain range there? Is there an uncrossable river? Whatever the scenario is. But I think that that would be just a tremendous amount of fun and a great way to build investment from your players, that they are literally, in a very physical sense, actually creating the game world with you, and then playing in it. I think in my head that would be super duper effective, and so I'm really looking forward to getting a copy of the book, so that maybe once this campaign is wrapped up and we start another one, we can go ahead and dive into it that way. I've played with the rules a little bit in the PDF. They're really, really good. So I'm really looking forward to kind of playing with that a little bit more. So
Cool.
yeah. So all right, gents. I think that is our show for this evening. So, fantastic topic, Michael. I really appreciate you tossing that out there. This is an awful lot of fun. Let's see, what do we get? So next week on the show, we're going to be going with another topic that we kind of tossed around on our group chat here. But next week, we're going to be revisiting the topic of skills challenges. Skills challenges were a thing that were huge in 4th edition. They kind of faded off a little bit in 5th edition, but they've made a resurgence. I think we've already done one episode many, many years ago about skills challenges, but they kind of continue to go ahead and come up, and I'm continuing to go ahead and use them in interesting ways. So I think that it's good to kind of like crack open that nut once again, and honestly with a different perspective, Michael, because I've never heard you talk about skills challenges.
I love skill challenges.
Yeah, they can be a lot of fun if they're done right. So and then after that, after skills challenges, we've got class warfare coming back with not paladin, not monk.
Monks,
Monk.
I believe.
Monk was the one after Bard. Yeah, so
already recorded. So there's going to be some timey-wimey here, because we're talking about something that happened in the past that you, the audience, will see in the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
Weird. Yeah. So
time is a flat circle. Yes.
I love it. It is way too late at night for you to be saying stuff like
Mobius Lupin.
So
It's more
right. Everybody, I appreciate you listening as always. We want to go ahead and hear about your favorite campaign seeds. How do you start your campaigns? What are the things that we've said tonight that you think are going to be awesome? What are the things that you toss out at your table that you would love to go ahead and see? You know, maybe they'll get used. Who knows? Never know.
There are a lot of forever GMs or frequent GMs that are part of the Tabletop Journeys community. We see you when you tune in on our live episodes. We see you in our various chats. We'd love to see you on our Discord talking about things like this, and on our Facebook group or wherever you happen to catch our show. Let us know your thoughts. Drop them down there. Give us a bunch of seeds. If there are enough seeds that the audience provides us that we didn't touch on tonight, we might revisit this one sooner rather than later, just to talk about the seeds that you're talking about, so you can hear your ideas on air.
And just think, if there are enough seeds, then even your garden can be legendary.
Exactly.
See, I'm not. I appreciate that. So, all right, everybody, have a great night. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Good night, all.